Okay, well, good morning to you. This is Ed Reether with Rana Chowdhury, who is in Melbourne, Australia. This is our third conversation. And if you've been following us, good morning. And I'm speaking to the audience here. Um, you were describing your journey, and in that specific part, you were speaking about a time when you were heading to Tiruvannamalai in the Ramana ashram. And you were profoundly affected by an experience that from the second session you said that you heard the voice come from your heart saying that I am not here, meaning a spirit spoke to you, telling you that you were not further to look on the continent of India or at Ramana Ashram, is from what I understand.
That's
For the
right.
So for the people who are following our conversation, maybe you could start from that time when you were contacted.
Mhm. Thank you. Um, I would say, the spirit is everywhere. When I heard that voice from within my heart say, I am not here, what I understood was the spirit is everywhere. I was experiencing the spirit sitting there with, it wasn't abstract. It was an event in my conscious awareness, but it was also very much energetic. It was physical. It was this whole energy all around my body, within my body, all through my body. There was a jolt. So the spirit was not in doubt. It is everywhere. When I heard the voice saying, I am not here, understood that my teacher, which is a very personal connection, my human teacher, guru, he or she was not in India. And that was the shocking discovery for me after 12 years of searching and convinced that I will find my guru somewhere in India. Where else would, a guru be?
Right.
Um, so, so after that incident, what happened was that this intense force of looking, studying, seeking, thinking, wondering, talking, dreaming, having visions, I had years of that with that impulse of finding my teacher. And that came to a dead end, not in terms of my impulse to find my teacher, but I'm just recapping at the last conversation. I was saying that the willfulness that with my own self effort or the ego trying to take heaven by storm, that was shown that this is not how it works. So that
Right.
I have to be still. I have to listen to that stillness and wait and, trust, surrender to it, and then whatever is shown will be shown. So what I did is I went back home, and for almost a month, I just stayed home. I didn't go anywhere, and it was like a retreat time that I was just doing some simple practices, as in silent prayer and meditation. But essentially, I call it my time of stillness. It wasn't some technique I was practicing to get somewhere. It was just that stillness. I just waited there. And what happened was, this is 2001, late 2001. And one night I lay in bed, and there was like a review of my entire life, my journey until that time. I was 27 years old. And I was just seeing it in my mind's eye that there I was, a child, and then I had, all kinds of dramatic experiences and illnesses, and then recovered, and just seeing my journey. I'm not going to go into details, but I just saw the phases of those 27 years, And I saw that in the previous 2 or 3 years of intensive travel all over India, going to holy places, ashrams, and study, uh, that somehow in the previous 2 years or so, I felt that my whole life until that time had just unraveled. It was an undoing. It wasn't leading somewhere that I could see as success and achievement of the previous commitment and search and dedication. I just saw all of that had its time, and then now it has reached this point where it cannot go any further. And that I'm being guided, but not in the way I thought. That letting go
Right.
was the
Right.
test. And in that, something very interesting happened. So after more than an hour or two of just lying in bed with eyes wide open, I was in that in-between state of not asleep, not awake. I was in the intermediate zone, just available. And then something very odd happened. I had this feeling that there was this, my gaze met a book, a little book on my bookshelf, and it happened spontaneously. I wasn't planning, looking around. It was just there. I just noticed my eyes are, while I'm going through all of this internally, my eyes were on this book on the shelf. And I had come across that book 2 years previously, and I'll describe how that had happened. But in this moment, I felt this completely irrational impulse to go and pick up the book and do something with it, because I felt that book was destroying my life. That's how it felt. That not destroying, it was undoing my whole search. That was the distinct feeling. And so I'll then tell the story about the book. So that's 2 years previous, 1999. I'm age 25. In the middle of 1999, I suddenly came down with some kind of illness that nobody could explain what it was. I couldn't, and I went to 5 or 6 different doctors. I had symptoms of high fever for a month. I lost 10 kilos. I had intense aches and pains in all the joints in my body. I could hardly eat. I could hardly sleep. I was delirious, as in while waking, I would have visions. I would see all kinds of invisible energies and entities. It was a dramatic situation that I couldn't switch off. And but a month or two before this episode, what happened was one of my friends called me and said, Rana, would you like to come over to our house? We've got a family library, and it's got more than 2,000 books, and we're about to let go of most of it. It's just gathering dust, too many books from over the years. Anyway, you love books, so do you want to have a look? And I said, I seriously doubt you would have the kind of books I like. I'm deeply into, um, not the kind of usual, I knew what kind of books they read. And he insisted, no, please, I'm sure you will find at least one book. It will give me some satisfaction if you find at least one. So I went over to his house, and I looked around and I saw all the thousands of books. And then I said, look, I'll just stand in the middle of the room. I'll close my eyes, and I will feel, not think, I will feel in what direction I am attracted, in what direction I am drawn. And I'll just walk to the shelf, and I'll pick up 3 books, and I'll go home. I'm doing this for you. And he said, okay, agreed, deal, go do that. And that's exactly what I did. I stood in the middle of the room, and I felt drawn in one particular direction, and I walked up to the shelf, and I picked up 3 books. The first one was Sri Ramana Gita. It's a book written by one of the senior disciples, devotees of Ramana Maharshi, Sri Ramana Gita. And then second one was a book by Anandamayi Ma, another Indian saint and mystic. And both of these I was familiar with. I had studied them for years, so I was very grateful. I literally took it as they came to me. So I honored those two books and received. The third one was a little book, you will remember, Ed, from the old days. It was called Four Fundamental Questions. And it had this funny cover with, anyway, so I thought it was, and I mentioned it previously, I thought it was for children. And I didn't pay much attention to the book. And it says, Adi Da Samraj, back then the name was Da Free John. And I just looked at it. I thought, why is this book coming to me? But since it has, I will keep it. Maybe I'll give it to my cousins and nephews. They will learn English. It's probably a child's storybook or something. I literally took it with that in mind, and I didn't touch it for months until after that whole illness episode happened, where I was in a very sensitized, altered state of consciousness. And near the end of that month-long illness, I was drawn to that book. And I thought, okay, it's trying to tell me something, that book. Whether it's for kids, I don't care. I need to read this. So then I opened it. And as I started reading, my first reaction, because I was a student of English language and literature and history, whenever I read something, part of me is looking at the literary side of it, the use of language and that bit. And first thing that's affected me was nobody else that I know uses the English language like this. This is very strange. All the capitals and underlines and dashes and hyphens, I was offended. Like, who does he think he is? So, what is he doing with the language? But then as I got the sense of that, wow, this is actually a spiritual book. And it's got teachings in it. And it's addressing these fundamental questions. From my previous study, I felt, wow, this is actually almost how the ancient Vedic teachers addressed deep spiritual and philosophical questions. And also, I remembered, Plato and Socrates with their dialogues and, delving deeper and deeper into existential questions that take us to a place of deep. So I was going through various that kind of appreciation, but also very cautious. And by the time I ended the book, I started laughing. And my impression was, I'll just say it in short, I thought, oh, well, one more American, read a few Indian books, now he's a teacher, and he's writing all these great grand things. That's fine for people in New York. I don't need this. And I'm Indian. So just to give that background, that after that, for 2 years, I didn't touch that book. It was on the shelf. And meanwhile, I was on my search for my guru all over India. So that's 2 years down the line that I described to you, that whole Tiruvannamalai journey and then what happened, heard the voice. So this is 2 years later, 2001. Now I am 27 years old and I'm lying in bed that whole time I'm describing. And my whole life in my mind's eye is shown as it's unraveling. And I somehow, in a gut feeling, I felt that book is messing with me. That book has got some energy coming out of it that's undoing my search. So it was a primal, primitive reaction. I got angry. I got frustrated. And I got out of bed and I picked up that book and I hurled it against the wall with my entire strength. That you are messing with me. I'm not going to have this. And this book, this is 21 years later. As I speak, it's right next to my bed here, on my bookshelf. I don't feel, I always keep it next to me. And it was completely untouched. Like the whole force with which there was no impact whatsoever. It just sprang back and I looked at it and I realized, oh my God, for a second time in 2 years, this book has something to tell me. It's got a message. However, I received it last time, I didn't get it. I need to listen to it again. So it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. So I sit down almost like I'm having a grumpy argument with this book. And then I say, okay, I'll calm down. I'll listen to you one more time and see what's going on here. This time I started reading, and within seconds, very, very concrete experience I'm describing, my brain completely went quiet. The ability to have a single thought dissolved. My eyes are looking at the words on the page, but there's absolutely nothing going on inside my head in terms of thinking. And the words, as I am gazing at them, I visually saw golden light from the page pouring out. And it was this transmission that was actually I was receiving with my eyes, my face, my hands, my whole body. I wasn't reading a book with my mind. It was this object there, an energy pouring out, and it's entering my whole body. And without thought, it resonated. Every single word resonated with my heart. Very distinct. I could feel every single word with my heart, while with my mind, I didn't understand anything. And this is someone who, since age 6, has read thousands of books. This experience, and it was a small book, maybe 100 pages or so, very small, but it was timeless because I wasn't doing conventional reading. I was having, it's like in the stories of somebody after trekking for days or months reach some mountain top monastery in Tibet and get a glimpse of a tanka. It was like that I had gone through an ordeal for 3 years, and I was at my end, and something cracked open, and I was given a glimpse. And in that space of timelessness, mindlessness, even my sense of a limited physical body dissolved. I was in this, the whole room around me felt like this vast field of light, and I was just in that space. And then by the time I finished the book, I realized the sun had just come up. The whole night passed. I had completely lost any track of time, and my whole body and mind was in a complete stillness and peace. And when I finished, I put the book down, closed my eyes, and I heard 2 words from my heart, and it was, I'm coming. It was my heart's response. Previously, I heard the teacher's voice, the guru's voice saying, I am not here, meaning in India. And this was my response saying, I'm coming, meaning wherever you are on this earth. I didn't know where Dafri John lived. I had no idea. I'm sitting in Bangladesh. But I just, in my heart, after this night's experience, I felt, this is my teacher. So I'm going to see him wherever he is. And and then I looked for, where does he live? Does he have an ashram? And I found that the only address there was California. And I said, oh, that's, I've never been outside India. How am I going to go to California to see this teacher? Is he even alive? The book was from 1982. So that put me on a whole journey. And even though I was 27 years old, I had never used a computer. So it's very interesting. My whole introduction to the technology of internet was so that I could find out at that time, present time, where Adi Da was, what is he doing? Is there an ashram? That was the reason I learned how to use the internet. So then I went online and found some information, and I saw that there is a community, the largest one in California. That's where the main sanctuary, the first one is. But to my great surprise, I found out that soon after that book was written, he moved to Fiji. So that's like the other end of the world. And then I realized, oh my God, I have to go to both of those places someday. And there's nothing by willful effort that I could possibly do to accomplish this. So from that day onwards, it became a daily prayer, a prayer of intention, a prayer of asking for guidance, for help, whatever I have to go through in my outer life, that at the right time, my prayer was that I may be able to go and see my Guru. It's the greatest impulse any devotee can have once they have found, recognized the Guru. So that put my life on a whole different rhythm and journey from that day on in ways that I could not possibly explain. I was not in control or charge of anything. It was a daily test of trust, faith, patience, and prayer.
Well,
And
clearly,
yeah,
I don't mean to interrupt your story. At some point in time, you got to leave India. And
yes,
where did you where did you finally see Adi Da in person?
okay. So, so this incident with the book is 2001, middle of 2001. Actually, also have to, very important, the day is also very significant, which was not planned. This is just how it happened. The day was 4th of July, 2002. Now, 4th of July, for your viewers and yourself, Americans, it's your American Day of Independence. But for us, 4th of July is the death anniversary of Swami Vivekananda. And what is more, 2002 was his 100th anniversary. So that's a special one. He died 4th of July 1902. So this was 4th of July 2002. And on that day, this happened. Now, I won't make any much more comments on this at this point. I'll just mention that. So later, some point, hopefully, I can touch on that.
Right, right,
But
right.
what happened was very, very important is that after this incident I described with the book, it took another year before I traveled to Australia, because that was the nearest community, I was told, when I contacted the online, organization, and they said, well, there are no ashrams in India. And I was in shock. Like, how is it possible? This teacher has been there for so long and there's no ashram in India. So I was told the nearest would be in Australia, so that's where I have to go. And secondly, that he lives in Fiji now. That's the main sanctuary. So if you want to go and see him, you would have to prepare in a community, and then finally you can go see him, but it would have to be in Fiji, not America. So that totally turned my direction around. So I'm describing a 4-year process from the time of this, what I'm describing, this reading the book. It took a total of 4 years before I found myself in Fiji on a pilgrimage retreat, and I finally saw my guru. Then, this was only 2 years before his passing, and it was only in that 1 year I made 2 trips, and altogether I spent about 3 months while he was there, and that was the highlight of my whole life, and still is.
Right. And so when
So
you went to Australia, you were immediately integrated into the community, or did you have to live on your own? How were you
um
introduced?
yeah what happened is, I came here middle of 2003, so about 17 and a half years now. I had no idea how long I'll be here. All I knew was that I may have to be here a few years to get integrated in the community, learn the practices, prepare myself to go see the guru in Fiji at the appropriate time. What would happen after that, I had no idea.
And
I was
so
also, yeah.
you were immediately brought into a community household or a circumstance that was supportive to what your journey was bringing you to?
No, no, it took a while because I mean, for I was studying. I was living on a university campus that was more than an hour and a half from the community center, um, and I was on a student visa, and I was working odd jobs during the day, studying at night, and then
So were
once a
you
week.
so I just want to back up. So did you go as a student to a university?
Yes,
And what was your study?
I was doing a master's degree in education.
Okay. So you
So
really had to conform. You really had to get your ducks in a row to become a student and to become get accepted to a university. And then, I mean, that's not just get on a boat and go to Australia. You had to
no, no,
conform.
no, no. It was mountain climbing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And the
yeah.
culture shock, and absolutely on my own with $50 in my pocket, nothing, nothing known about my future. It was literally jumping off the cliff. It was entirely my whole heart and mind and attention was just focused on that one. It's that lighthouse on the hill. That I'm on a journey to meet my guru. Nothing is more important in this world, and I will go through anything and accept whatever challenge comes with gratitude. Not complain, not react, not say this is difficult. This is just what has to be done.
Right.
If
What's
I, yeah,
interesting to me, because a lot of people would have just singularly done that in a way that was just singly focused, but you, because I believe you understand the realities of embodiment, you did it in a context of a student. You didn't just go there and knock on somebody's door and say, I want to see the guru. You did it with a cultural circumstance as a student in a university
yes,
circumstance.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
that's right.
Which is important for me to for what I want to communicate to the readers in this, what I'm learning, is that you did it in a very practical and also, understanding the realities of life.
Yes, yes, very much so. And
Right.
to me, my inner life and outer life were one process. I didn't feel, oh, within myself, I'm now ready for spiritual life. Outwardly, life should be easy. Or,
Right.
you know,
Right. Or I'm
why
going
do I
to
have to,
abandon life and I'm just going to
yeah,
fall at
yeah,
the
yeah,
feet
why
of the
do I have to
guru.
get a job? Why do I have to deal with visas and,
Right.
jobs?
Right.
And no, if anything, I knew from my traditional understanding, I knew that back in the old days, there are all these stories about, you know, the more serious this student is, the higher the price they had to pay
Right.
in terms of getting to see the teacher, receiving the instruction. It the more we show our earnestness, our right disposition, how deeply we value this opportunity
All right,
of,
so
yeah,
I want to go into your transition from being in India and Bangladesh to going into Melbourne, Australia, I believe is where
mhm.
you went.
Yes, yes, yes,
And now you're not only getting culturated into the Western, you're actually specifically getting culturated into a devotee lifestyle
mm-hmm,
or the
mm-hmm.
community of the Adidam community. You were given a very specific orientation in the community and the who were in that community of how to behave and what you did and how you lived.
Yes, yes, and that definitely took a while. So I'm describing, say, the first 6 months. Naturally, it was, a lot of adjustment to the Western world that I've never been to, all the things that are different and completely alone. I didn't know anybody, and job and study. And then in addition, I was studying Adi Da's teachings intensively. And once a week, I was going to kind of whatever events were available for a new person that's interested, because I wasn't formally anything.
All right.
So I just humbly followed whatever was available at my level of participation, and I was grateful, and I did it with full energy. Rain, hail, or shine, I just stayed steady with that determination. And then, but I wasn't living within the community. I was
All right.
traveling a lot, and staying in contact. And then, about, I would say almost a year was like this, that I was staying on campus with some other Indian students that were at the university. They were not interested in what I was involved in. They would often make jokes about, oh, you don't come from India to here to look for teachers, there's hundreds of them in India. uh, you're making a mistake. But about after a year or so, I was able to move closer to where most of the devotees in the community lived. Got a job in the city, and then finally I moved into a household with a few other devotees, and then that kind of setting, different households where there are other practitioners, from that time on became my usual setting. I never really since then never have just lived by myself. Um,
So
so
I want to ask you about your study now. Not the university study, but the Adi Da study. So did you learn more about the teachings and because you had to attend study groups or uh, learn more about his teaching word and
yes,
his literature. So what were
I did.
your yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, no,
Well,
please
what
go ahead.
I want to focus in on your particular dharmic um, orientation. What was it attractive in the teaching? Not just the person himself, but the
Hmm.
teaching itself. What was it that what you were learning about his, if you will, unique teaching?
Ah, well, this is a whole conversation in itself,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
how
but
deeply I'm
we're
interested.
believe me, we're gonna
With
focus in. But I just want to do a
okay,
little jump frog here.
outline. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now this is very exciting for me. So, but I'll need your help to keep it outlined first. Then we'll slowly go into detail.
Yeah, I want to. This is what I want to do. I want to get a
Yes.
general hop, skip, and a jump. Then we'll get
Good.
into the
Good. Good.
details.
Good. Um, Now, starting from 1999, 21 years, I am deeply studying Adi Da's teaching, as well as The Basket of Tolerance, one of his major books, where it's not just his commentary on the entire tradition of spiritual wisdom, the whole spectrum, but also the actual books themselves are listed, and it's a unique book, as you know. Um, so, what I found unique, just at the level of the Dharma, the teaching, and that is from somebody who, unlike most people in the Western world that have come across Adi Da, I mean, very few, there are they already had a background in studying various other traditions before they came to Adi Da. But in my case, I already had 15 years of studying and exploring all these other traditional teachings before I came to Adi Da. So my appreciation of the teaching was informed by that. So what I saw, just to put it in a nutshell, in the first 3-4 years of coming across his teaching is many things. Number one, I would say all inclusive, and the other one I would say is radical. Those are the two elements I will focus on. That the first thing I noticed was from my in-depth study until that time, I already was developing a basic summary of the major types of teachings. Now, I didn't have to invent that. There was already a traditional understanding, and Swami Vivekananda, for example, he did a summation of the various teachings, and like his books about the four yogas, for example, that the Indian and Buddhist traditions, he would summarize them as falling broadly into four categories or aspects of teaching. So there's Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. He wrote 4 books 120 years ago, summarizing those 4 types of teachings. And so Karma Yoga is the yoga of
Right, but
service.
let's not, I don't want to get into
Okay, I won't go into that.
Vivekananda.
Okay, good. So, but what I saw is that all of those aspects were in Adi Da's teaching. There is an aspect that is about right action and service and involvement and participation in the world. There is fundamental of the way of practice he gives is Bhakti Yoga. It's a way of devotion. It's not just understanding and beliefs and behaviors. Devotion, as traditionally, anciently understood. And then Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, that there is, subtler, higher aspects of the psychophysical mechanism that is, explored, understood, transcended. And then the type of teaching that we find in Advaita Vedanta and also highest aspects of Buddhism, that's Jnana Yoga. That's the
I guess
all of those aspects. Go on.
what I want to address is because there's something that is very fundamental to Adi Da's teaching and also his person, which is coexisting with the argument. But it's something that you actually experienced when you were on the road. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's called the search.
Yes.
So without getting too dharmic in here, is that your experience was that you were searching, and you were looking, and the willful individual, the youthful vibrance of individuality brought you to a place where your search was, if you will, beginning to be undone, or your fundamental awakening, as I saw it, was that you saw the fruitlessness of the search.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is why I was saying I want to focus on 2 words. First, I said all-inclusive, which I already described, but that wasn't the most interesting. There have been other, teachers in modern times that have kind of incorporated different aspects of teachings in their own teaching. What struck me more was this radical, using the word radical that Adi Da used, that going to the root. Now we are coming to that. What is the root? That as a very intense and serious from childhood spiritual seeker, I was very sensitive to this mechanism of search, that the human life, human being is driven by a search. I had an acute awareness of it through my own self and looking at, observing life all around me from childhood, that I saw that there is a dilemma, there is a dichotomy, that there is worldliness, there is spirituality, there is, here and there is up there. That runs throughout our history. And I had, from age about 12 or so until I came across Adi Da's teaching, I took the spiritual search seriously, and I saw it as something superior, something better, something worthy. I completely believed it and fully gave myself to it. And all the while, I was uncomfortable. I didn't understand with my mind. There was something in my being, physically, emotionally, that felt uncomfortable. And I didn't know until I came across Adi Da's teaching why I was uncomfortable. That why I was not satisfied with all the opportunities that I got with various Indian gurus, with directly meeting them, and also in some cases where the guru has passed, I met with senior disciples. I had opportunities to live on ashrams. Like in the conventional sense, that match could have just happened. I could have not come across Adi Da. I could have just slot right into an ashram with a serious group of practitioners under whatever teacher or tradition in some part of India and live the rest of my life there. But that was not my destiny. I already had a sense of limitation there that I could not figure out by myself. I needed grace. I needed help. And Adi Da's teaching brought that to me. That when I first read The Knee of Listening, that cut the whole search up to that time. This was 2004, the year I became 30 years old. But that was the new edition of The Knee of Listening. I read the first edition, or the older one, from 94 edition in 2002, I believe. And that argument totally spoke to my heart. That, I'll just say that, from The Knee of Listening, that at around age 20, Adi Da had that Columbia experience that he describes when he was going to Columbia University. And after 3-4 years as a young man going through his intense search, both ordinary human search as well as spiritual search, meditation, all the inner contemplation, study, he came to a dead end. And a revolution, a turnabout in the conscious awareness he describes. And that is what I connected to. That it totally spoke to me, that the whole human project, if you like, is based on this search that's based on dilemma. And when that revelation, that realization from that incident in 1960 at Columbia University, he summarizes and he says, truth cannot be found as a result of seeking. And then the second one, corollary, happiness and freedom are always already the case. Those are the two insights that came from his experience in Columbia. And that to me have always stayed as the radical essence of his teaching that stands out from the entire great tradition as I have experienced it.
Right.
That the entire, up to Adi Da's, revelation or his teaching, the entire spiritual tradition is, to me, I'm speaking all in my personal experience of it, saying there is limitation, there is dukkha, there is suffering, there is bondage, there is illusion, and to awaken from that, to be liberated from that, there are the spiritual teachings, beliefs, disciplines, practices to be done with great dedication, and then at the end of it all, there will be enlightenment, liberation. So that spiritual search was fully recommended, and that it can be fulfilled. And enlightenment was conceived as the fulfillment of that search. That was what totally hit me, that Adi Da turned it upside down. And not by, just claiming something, at random or something. It directly spoke to my experience. That for years, that search I was engaged in, I was at the same time in this deep, indefinable feeling of, how is this different than the usual search in ordinary terms? And that sense of dilemma, and if there is a divine absolute reality and truth, that would be the case right now. It cannot be something at the end of something has to be worked out. I had a tacit feeling of that. I couldn't formulate it for all those years. And it all became crystal clear once I came across Adi Da, his influence, his transmission. Is that I was affected by his transmission, even though physically he was at one end of the world and I am in another world, and there was no institution, no formal education, nothing. I was going through an inner journey, inner process. And from that, I somehow got into contact with his influence, his transmission beyond words first, then the teaching made sense and completely spoke to that.
So there's a lot in that I could want to go into, but I want to stay with that original question of how you got to see Adi Da. So this I would like to address to the listeners and the watchers here is that this is a very compact subject that I want to develop with you
Mm.
in the paradoxical language of Adi Da, because here you have the awakening, you have been liberated from that, and yet there still seems to be a devotional process that one has to engage in. So I just want to hold that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go to the meeting that you sometime you got to sit in Adi Da's company.
Oh, yes.
Well, what was that like? And what?
Mm. So the story, I'll pick up where I left. So 2003, I came to Australia, and 2006 is when I went to Fiji and saw Adi Da. So there was a 3-year period in Australia where I was adapting to the Western world, handling my ordinary life obligations, visiting my family back home overseas once a year, studying Adi Da's teaching, participating in Adi Da's community in Australia, and meeting with other devotees that would come on their way back from Fiji, passing through Australia, or I was always eager to hear all the stories from others, and just with great excitement and longing, waiting for that moment when I can finally go and see my guru. So it was all leading to that. So then, 2004, I think, okay, the leading up to me seeing him, there is something to describe here. 2005 really happened. Adi Da, I'm sure you know, gave these discourses that were live broadcast to all his students around the world in present time, real time. That, for someone new like me, was incredible. It was a miracle. It was unbelievable that before I had the chance to go and see him physically, I was able to watch all these discourses, more than 50 of them, in 2004 and 2005. So we would hear that such and such a time there will be a broadcast, and we would go and gather in the community center, all of us sitting together, and then we'd meditate together, and then we would listen to these discourses. They were out of this world. They were just transporting all of us, and I can speak my experience, out of time and space. It literally felt like being in the physical room with the guru. And to me, that was beyond my wildest dream, because until that time I had read all the leelas, the stories about other devotees from the 70s, 80s, how they were around Adi Da when he gave those discourses. And I knew, in early 2000s, Adi Da no longer worked in that particular way. It was, part of his previous demonstration and history, but now he didn't gather in those ways. So 2004-5, those discourses prepared me, led to the 2006 going and seeing him in Fiji. And he made his final trip to America, in California, the sanctuary, in 2005. And he finally came back to Fiji February 2006, after which the remaining 3 years of his life he was there. He didn't travel anymore. So that gives you the sense, the setting. So then he arrived in Fiji February 2006, and I had the great opportunity to go and see him like a month after, March 2006. And between March and August, I was there total 3 months, like on 2 trips. And I had the great fortune to see him hundreds of times. both informal situations where I had the great fortune to serve around his house and in places where he worked. He did his writing, he did his artwork. I got to see all those places and do those places. That was a great, great blessing. And then I had countless opportunities of sitting in silent darshan, as in sighting, meditative sighting occasions. I got the opportunity to sit with him and a small group of devotees watching his artwork on a big screen right after he has just made them. So there were all those magical elements of my time around him in 2006. And what was it like? How can I even describe it? Maybe the first occasion, I will describe the first occasion that kind of gives a glimpse, is I was around his house out in the lawns. I was happily working there all day, preparing to meet the Guru, and he was doing his writing in his office, writing on his books, teaching, and then in the afternoon when he's coming back to his house, that's when I got to see him first time, face to face. So I'll never forget that. It's completely etched into my whole being. It's alive. It was not just something in the past. I can feel it right now as I speak. So there were only 3 of us that were new devotees. We had come on the same boat, and we were waiting for that moment to offer our gifts. We had malas and gifts prepared. Adi Da always, received in that way new devotees that came to see him. So there was a long waiting period, and in that I was doing service out on the grounds, but also I had several hours of chanting, meditation, prayer in the morning. So that whole day was preparation, and then the energy is just growing, and I could just feel like this magnetic feeling of like, oh, I'm getting closer and closer and closer. Then there will be this moment, and then finally, when he arrived in front of his house, he just stood there with his staff and stood there just for a few minutes, and 3 of us just in front of him. What happened is I looked up at his face, and his whole body, to my eyes, I saw started growing bigger and bigger. My usual, science and physics rules were melting. I just saw that his whole body was transparent. I could almost see through his body, like on the other side. It was made of light. That was what I was visually seeing. And him standing, literally, his face, I saw bigger than the sun. I saw this pure light pouring down in all directions. And I could describe all kinds of effects it had on me, but that was secondary. Even though it was extraordinary, what actually happened was something in my whole mechanism of attention, me as a separate someone, even traditionally understood as something positive, as in a soul, that whole foundation of all dilemma, all seeking, not just ordinary and worldly, but even extraordinary and spiritual and worthy, the very root of all of that vanished. It melted, and it just dissolved into this ecstasy, this bliss that was timeless, boundless, fearless, total joyful, nothing but love and beauty, utter peace and freedom, and without a single word. It was simply him standing there, transmitting that state, and me as a new devotee there, humbly just sitting on the grass, looking up at him. It was maybe 3 minutes in total, but it felt like an eternity. There was no time, and there was no space, there was no divisions, conflict, dilemma, and there was no self and other. It was that paradox that with my whole being, I felt the deepest love and devotion towards this being that's outside of me. And at the same time, it was not someone else. It was like I met myself, my true self, my true condition for the first time in my life. Yes, I had some glimpses of it, tastes of it. That's why I was drawn to him. But that meeting was truly not meeting someone else. It was meeting what is real,
Well, I
what
think
is
I
true.
remember a term he uses. He says, I do not cause your enlightenment.
Mm,
I am your enlightenment.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That is, in a nutshell, what I experienced. And um, there's this simple story from Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he once described that when he met his guru, Nisargadatta Maharaj, late 19th century, early 20th century, um, he was a farmer. He was an uneducated village peasant. Uh, and he was a married man living his ordinary life and everything, but deep within his heart was this profound longing for truth and longing for finding the guru. And but what happened in his case is one day he sees this man walking past while he is working with his hoe and in the field, and he looks up and he feels he's met the thousand suns. There's this man who's just shining the real condition to him. And he didn't, with his mind, understand anything. He just was blown away. And he just went and did a, pranam and said, "Who are you?" And the guru said, "I am you." That is what my experience was. First time I saw Adi Da was that this is my real condition. This is my enlightenment. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to minimize that feeling, but I want to move. So now you're on the island.
Mhm.
You're serving. Do you develop a particular service? Are you seen differently as a Eastern person as opposed to a Western? Do people see that you have a background that's deeper than a European?
Um, yes, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. The yes is in the sense of people could feel that I had a certain quality, a certain disposition, certain background, understanding, cultural, all of that. So they valued that and everybody tried to give me the opportunity um, to serve Adi Da in whatever way best I could.
So were you ever drawn into the editorial world in the community? Were you brought into anything that had to do with writing or literature?
Um, for a certain period in those 3 months, I did have the opportunity to work with the main editorial team while Adi Da was writing his Happenine book. So I had the opportunity to do some of the proofreading and preparing every day to send back to him. Then he would edit them further and ask for changes. So it was a very simple service, but it was incredible to have that access daily when he was writing a new profound text. But then, no, I didn't see. Once we come to this point in the story, Ed, it's very important, I think, just to, in a summary way, for me to express that from my side and from the formal, existing, largely Western institutional gathering of Aridam, on both sides, I was impulsed with all my background and knowledge and skills to do some very important service that specifically could communicate about Adi Da to a larger audience, especially a non-Western audience, but also
Right.
Western because I can be a bridge. Um, but and from the formal side, they did at different times try to give me opportunity to do so. But now that I look back, my whole story is a bit of a paradox. That yes, at one point I did some translations for communicating about Adi Da in India, for example. That a Western devotee wrote a small book for India, and then with my Indian background, I edited it, translated it into 2 languages, and as well as every year I went to India for 10 years to make Adi Da known there, and certain good things came out of it, and then certain other things were lessons for the future. All of that, but um, I've been torn in the one way of just speaking and writing about Adi Da, but then also it has to correspond. See, one of the things in the kind of collective gathering of followers and students, there's a challenge that it's not, and Adi always told us, we cannot just communicate about him by making proclamations that this is who he is, this is his grand teaching, this is this and that. He's always said you cannot do that. He always said that the gathering, the sangha, is the way to me. He didn't say the books are the way to me. Sometimes he would say the books, the teaching is his business card. It's as in, to give an ordinary metaphor, that is the first, point of contact. But to really come to him as guru, as spiritual master, spiritual teacher, source of blessing and guidance and transformation, that can only happen to that human vehicle of, the community of practitioners, devotees. And that's where I've always struggled. This is not
That's where
to,
you what?
I've always struggled. Struggled meaning, um, like I couldn't just sit down and write a book about Adi Da. I haven't been able to
Right.
do that. I've always been trying to participate in the creative challenge of establishing the community, let's say here in Australia, because this is where I live. But I've always deeply been interested in and involved with the processes and questions and considerations about authenticity as a collective culture of you know devotion and
So
practice.
did you have any desire or impulse, or were you asked to ever stay and remain on the island for any extended period of time? Did you have a wish to do that?
My God, yes, very much so. Various longtime devotees from the island, they wanted me to stay there permanently. There were times and situations where Arida himself communicated directly or indirectly to that effect, that I should be there, ongoing, serving around him and be part of the culture there and bring a certain quality there that comes from the traditions. However, he also told me to take a significant role in serving his work in India, and then also he called me to have an active role in America with the Central Institution, and making sure that the sacred principles were rightly understood and applied, that the sacred principles for how to structure the global institution of Adidam that is not directly something that spiritual realizers do, but this is for the unique nature of his work and its global breadth. He needs a particular institutional structure, but he has given heaps of instructions about it, and he acknowledged that because of my traditional background, I have a particular understanding of that, that should be brought to bear. So there are
Yeah,
elements
well,
of what.
that's what I'm sensing is because you're a very I know a lot of devotees over almost a half a century now,
Yeah,
and you represent a unique uh, person, not individually as an egoic person, but as a cultural person, and with your language skills, your background in the history, and also the study, and also the whole. Basically, if you were to type the lineage or the tradition from which Adi Da comes from, it is from the Siddha tradition. It is from India. It's not from the United States or Jerusalem. So,
absolutely. Yes,
you know,
yes.
so you represent a deeper understanding of the tradition or the traditions or the cultural mechanisms because India, with its 1 billion people, and would benefit, I would think, from having somebody of their own background speak to them or be with them or to talk to them of that, your relationship to your guru.
Very much so, and nothing gives me greater joy. For 17 years, I've been to India almost once a year, and some short trips, some longer trips, and some more focused specifically on doing service, making Adi Da known, traveling all over India. I've done that for many years. But so, without a question, that's very close to my heart. In my natural impulse, not just because my guru asked me to do it, I'm moved to do it. I want to do it with
Right,
excitement, joy,
right.
and but um, you know, the challenge for me has been continually for 18 years to have humility, faith, and patience because I have not been able to move with as much energy and make things happen as I would love to because it requires a collective force. It needs a team. I cannot just run around on my own all over
Right,
India.
right, right,
Um,
right.
and this is where I want to touch on something briefly, but this will probably be a good segue for our next conversation. I would
Okay, I
propose.
mean, because we've been here for, an hour and 7 minutes here, so
Yeah.
why don't you bring up this topic and we'll bring it up on the next session.
Yes. So what I would like to do is next conversation, I would try to bring some of the very essential elements of my understanding of from the traditions, and I will draw upon the Hindu and Buddhist traditions primarily, to understand the pattern of work in terms of the human manifestation of the gathering of devotees, followers, or friends of Adi Da's work, how I visualize that with my Indian and traditional background of understanding, coupled with my 18 years of study of Adi Da's own instructions about that collective manifestation. And I know that's our shared interest. We want to see how could a large number of people from various cultural backgrounds from around the world, what is the most fruitful pattern in which that could be happening? Why is it not happening? With such an extraordinary teacher, with all these incredible teachings and gifts he has given, why is it not growing significantly? Why is it not accessible? That's what moves me. And so, one thing just to finish off in this matter of okay, so I've been so torn. Here I live in the Western world to be the bridge, to understand, to be part of the community that is 99% Western. I had no, and also it's close to Fiji. So there are many reasons why I had to be in Australia. But in India, until something on the ground takes hold as an actual sangha, ongoing, like a sanctuary, physical, community, several hundred devotees, a regular devotional life, an ashram, it's not taking root. So that is something to make that possible over there. something of that has to take hold here in Australia, in Europe, in America. And even though almost 50 years of Adi Da's work, that is an element that where it is still struggling. I don't criticize anybody. I
Yeah,
just look at
yeah.
where the lacking is, and this is somewhere I would touch on in our next conversation. That the traditional understanding of a sangha, that Buddhist term, a sangha, a community of practitioners, how that's a creative task and challenge, and when done in the right way, a great gift. So one of
Right.
Adi Da's gifts is in that dimension, and I would like to discuss in some very practical ways. I want to bring some elements of that.
Yeah, no, because he's also spoken of uh, that imperative.
Absolutely, that's right. And I would say, in many ways, we have touched on what is unique about his communication. One thing I will touch now. One of his major texts is called the Dornhorst Testament, and um, and he has given so many different practices, disciplines, but there's this one statement where he says, if you abandon the discipline of sacred cooperative community, you abandon the way of the heart itself. Now, the way of the heart, as you know, is his also term for the way of adidam or practice, but that's the universal term, the way of the heart.
Right.
And that is an incredible statement. He hasn't said that about meditation, yoga, prayer, all the other disciplines, service. He has said, if you abandon the discipline of sacred cooperative community, you abandon the way of the heart itself. That's extraordinary. So that's a good starting point for our next conversation.
All right. I think it's
Yes,
very important, and we will continue that. And
we
I
will.
look forward to speaking with you again soon, hopefully tomorrow. We'll work out those details, but for now, I just want to say thank you for the audience staying with us, and I hope you found this to be helpful and instructive and also enjoyable. So again, Rana, I want to thank you very much for your time,
And I
and
thank you. Thank you, Ed.